Welcome back to another episode of Tape to Tape. I'm your host this week, Caroline. It's May 7th, and we are still talking hockey. So I'm thrilled, and I'm welcoming in my ever lovely co-host, Maria. How's it going, Maria?
Oh, it's great. I'm glad that we're not doing a wrap-up episode as we were so worried about last week. So kudos to the Boston Bruins for coming out on the right side of history as opposed to what the alternative might have been.
Yeah, they did not disappoint. I've been over the moon the last couple of days. So we've gotten to the point where I believe I said a successful season would be marked by making it to the second round. Everything else is gravy. I'm happy now. No, it doesn't matter what happens here on out. I'm happy.
Yeah, so whatever happens from this point forward, you can quantify this as a successful season, considering how the season started and the holes that the Bruins had to start the lineup. Has it been pretty? No, not always pretty. But pretty doesn't matter.
Exactly.
In sports. Doesn't matter in hockey, doesn't matter in the playoffs. Right. What matters is getting the W.
Exactly. So let's set the table for this particular week. As you alluded, the Bruins have come out on the right side here. The Leafs, not so much. Once again, the Boston Bruins continue their domination of the Leafs in the postseason, and all is still right in the world. Made it to round 2, which is fantastic. One little sidebar, I have to send my apologies to our friend Adrian because I called him out for starting a We Want Florida chat in the Discord, and I should have known better that it was Mo. So everybody say boo to Mo on that one. Apologies to Adrian. And you have been very vocal on local talk radio about our coach and the things that you have disagreed with him on, not just throughout the whole season, but in particular over the last few weeks. So why don't we start off with our stick taps for the week? And we've got Jim Montgomery to give stick taps to. So tell me, how do you feel differently now about Monty?
So first I have to say I issued the challenge. I issued it on the pod. I issued it on local sports talk radio before Game 7. If you want to change the narrative, players and coaches, the core, and the same coach who ostensibly blew a 3-1 lead last season against the Florida Panthers, I said, prove me wrong. Prove me wrong. And you know what? They proved me wrong.
Absolutely.
And I'm a big enough person to say, when I'm wrong, I'm wrong. And I'm going to say to Jim Montgomery, despite the fact that you got into your own head in Game 5 and messed around with a lineup that many of us, even people who are smarter than we are, that cover hockey a little bit deeper than we do, were questioning what he was doing.
Yep.
To you, sir, I say, I'm sorry, and I'm glad that you learned some lessons from last season.
Yeah. It's fascinating to see how quickly he made the pivot back. And we don't have to talk about Game 6. There was nothing to talk about for Game 6. It wasn't worth discussing. But the changes that he did make from 5 to 6 then started to really pay dividends. And you really saw how that attitude and that mental fortitude, I've talked about it a lot on the pod, how this team has been built a little bit differently because of the adversity that they have faced. They are a team that I think is very much so ruled by emotion and by what's happening in front of them. And that's always been a little bit of the team's personality, but obviously with the captaincy that we have right now, I mean, that is his personality, is, you know, wears his heart on his sleeve and is very reactive to everything that's happening out there. And a lot of times the battle that they would lose wasn't necessarily the lack of talent, right? We've said that 1,000 times on this show, that this team clearly has phenomenal talent and ability. And it's when they kind of don't rein in the emotion, or they are thinking too far ahead, or they're checked out in some way, they then trip and fall and land flat on their face. And that's, I think, coupled with what Monty did and some questionable coaching decisions, that's what I think led to those issues in games 5 and 6. And they were somehow then able to find that refocus for game 7. And then going into game 1, not really having a spectacular game. It was highly entertaining, but you could see how they were practicing that, I don't know what, if you want to call it mindfulness or what have you, where they are not letting all the noise, you know, oh, you're down, oh, you're the underdog, oh, you just traveled, oh, you're exhausted, oh, all these things, oh, the history. They didn't let it get in, and they were able to overcome that and take care of Florida fairly handily. So I think my biggest stick tap for me has been that mental fortitude and that ability to just really stick with it and push through. Because it can very, very easily be their downfall. 100%.
And they could, you know, I mean, starting with game 7 against the Leafs, as you said, it was an entertaining game. It was a little bit gut wrenching, because I thought myself that Toronto looked like the better team for the majority of that game. And honestly, I'd be lying if I didn't say, when they scored the first goal, I thought my stomach was just going to hurl right out of my system. So, you know, if I'm feeling like that, my first thought was, here we go. The sticks are going to start getting tighter and tighter as this game progresses.
Yeah.
Thank God, to me, Hampus Lindholm, here, besides Jeremy Swayman, and I called him out too, as well as other players, because literally, you know, it's no lie. You hadn't gotten anything out of him up until that game 7. He set the tone from the very beginning with a shoot first mentality. I believe he had the most shots on goal of any Bruins player in that game. And, you know, for him to tie the game as quickly as it did, guess what happened? You want to talk about, you know, the mindset and mentality, as you referenced? The seed of doubt was then planted in the heads of the Toronto Maple Leafs. And you could see, here we friggin' go again. They came back and they tied the game. So then you could see them get a little bit tighter. They started icing the puck more often. And at times that they didn't need to ice the puck. But let's, you know, reverse and talk about, you know, what led up to the game 7 and the approach that Jim Montgomery took. Now, he wasn't the first one to take this approach, but to have the players stay at a hotel on Friday night and mirror a road game scenario where they're all locked in a hotel, they're hanging out together, they're, you know, minimizing and shutting out the noise, arriving at TD Garden on the bus, even practicing at TD Garden. Normally they would practice at Warrior Ice Arena in Brighton. So I have to give him credit for reaching down into that bag as prior coaches, and referencing conversations that he had with Bill Belichick in the past about how to shut out the noise that invariably players hear.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'll go back a little bit to Monty here. He showed some really creative coaching, both for game 7 and then for game 1. First, with that decision to mimic the road trip, it's both, it's accomplishing two things, kind of that team bonding, we're in it together, let's experience the moment, let's live in the moment kind of thing, so they can go together and be a true team on that last game. But then also his timeout kind of in the middle of the first game against Florida. Now he's done this before, and it's worked. It's had positive effects. I believe he did that in one of the New York Ranger games this season, when like all of a sudden they let in like 2 goals. Things seemed to start to get a little out of control, and he used it as a way to refocus them. And in this case, it was almost immediately afterwards we saw Brezzo's goal. So I think what this is like a breath of fresh air, because I feel like we've seen for so many seasons now, Boston will score a goal, and then how many times do we see the opponent turn around within 2 minutes and score another goal themselves, right? This time, Boston was in the other position, and to push through that and not give up, because again, we've seen that happen as well. Team scores the first goal and they just beat themselves up, and they can't push through it to actually then tie the game. So again, like another hat tip to Monty for those two strategies to help again with that refocus. It was probably some of the best coaching that I've seen him do, like actively coaching, right? Which we didn't really see quite so much last season.
No, he didn't really need to actively coach. And if I remember correctly, and I'm paraphrasing, he had said something at one point during the season that, basically Patrice Bergeron was coaching the team.
Yeah.
So, he didn't really need to be as actively involved in, be it the preparation, the mental mindset, like where's everybody's head at, and, having that connection with that relationship with Brad Marchand as the captain of the team, to get a pulse for, hey, where's everybody's head at with what's happening here, and being able to recognize the fact that there was immeasurable pressure on not only him, but a significant number of players who are still, part of the core, that were part of the core from the prior year. So,
and I think
a job, job well done. They could have easily mailed it in last night, with the quick turnaround and all of the physical and emotional toll that game 7 took out of them against the Maple Leafs. And again, was it pretty last night? Are there still areas of concern? Of course there are. And
our penalty box is still very full.
Yeah, the penalty box, folks, is still full. But again, they took advantage, in my mind, they took advantage of a team and a goalie, maybe not so much the skaters, but the goalie for the Florida Panthers, who seemed to not be as sharp as he had been in the series against Tampa. And oh, by the way, he had a great series, but he also gave up 16 goals,
Yeah, I'm
which is
pretty sure I think I saw on TV last night that Bob had a sub 90 save percentage. He was like 899 or something to that effect. Like he wasn't
right. So you can
that
score
great.
on him, folks. I guess the moral of that story is you can score on
Yeah.
Bob.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know, hockey players are very much so creatures of habit and doing a lot of the same things, whether it's for superstitious purposes or not, whatever. They're very much so, this is my routine. This is what, this is what we do. And this is how I'm going to respond. So, like, again, that second reason why I thought it was great that they were on staying in the hotel room. This team has been a phenomenal road team. So putting them in that mindset, because you're putting them in that environment as creatures of habit. So they're associating all these different things that they do, whether they realize it or not, when they're on the road, and they do really well. But what do you think, or how do you think the kind of quote unquote last minute goalie change from the Leafs, like what kind of mental, emotional, whatever impact do you think that had on the players as they, started game 7 and went through it? Did it have an impact on them?
I honestly don't know if it did. Perhaps not, because Samsonov had played a couple of very good games against the Bruins. I mean, Wall was the Leafs' better goalie when they went to him, and I think that game 6, that late goal that he allowed, which was, maybe you can call it garbage time. He supposedly tweaked something. And I just wonder if that was a little bit of a gnawing concern on the part of Sheldon Keefe, because that was a goal he likely should have stopped.
Yeah.
And so, the drama with the Leafs, man, is just, it's priceless. It's priceless. It's just absolutely priceless.
Exactly.
It's just every day something new with that organization. I'm going to tell you something about the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Please.
They can hire and sign all the high-end freaking talent they want. But until they learn something about culture and leadership, you're never going to win anything. You are never going to win anything. Yeah. So you guys keep going out and get all the high-priced toys.
Yeah.
But when you have a guy like Mitch Marner, who on more than one occasion in that series was nowhere to be found, dogging plays, looks like he's crying on the bench over what?
Priceless.
To the point. Yeah, it's just all priceless. And the fact that he had no awareness whatsoever that Pasta was behind him and got by him is just the most Toronto Maple Leafs moment ever.
Yes. Yes. And that's kind of another reason why I said before the series started, and, I was thinking ahead as well, as one does when you think, okay, these are kind of my general predictions. This is how far I think the Bruins could genuinely go. I said that Toronto in the first round was the exact shot in the arm that the Bruins would need to catapult them to the second round. And I mean, they made it. So, we can disagree on whether or not it was a good shot in the arm, but it got them there because there was a level of intensity. I mean, with the exception of, was it maybe game 5? I mean, we hadn't seen them start on time. Even game 2 that they lost, we hadn't seen them start on time like that in forever. Like, that was a shot in the arm most of those games. And I had a reasonable expectation, I think, that Florida would probably beat Tampa, because Tampa is kind of at the end of their era. And so even thinking about okay, feeling pretty good that they would play Florida in the second round. The history and the animosity that has existed between the Bruins and the Leafs set them up for that, to then also push them into a round against the Florida Panthers, who, yes, there's not that same long history, but this team is all about redemption, right? And this is another thing that I think could really help the Bruins push through any of those issues or challenges that they often come across, to help them, again, be another shot in the arm. I think I've been a little surprised, maybe I shouldn't be, that so many outsiders have really written the Bruins off like, oh, Florida's a much better team than they were last year. The Bruins are going to be lucky if they can get a win here. And it's like, I feel like people are not really looking at the context around the very recent history between these two teams and what the Bruins are truly going to attempt to accomplish in this series. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I always root for the underdog. And if that's what it takes, right, to light a fire under your ass, to be your best, to play your best, to have that motivation, then by all means, be the underdogs in this series. I honestly don't care about what the odds makers say and what the experts say. All you want to see is, and we've been saying this pretty much all season long about this team, just give me your best 60 minutes.
Yeah.
Give me your best 60 minutes.
But why do they have that reputation in this series as the underdog when, like, it, for whatever reason, it does not compute for me, because I don't see them as the underdog. If anything, I see them as a very fair matchup, but up until almost like game 80, they were first in the East. They finished second behind Florida. They beat Florida all 4 games during the regular season. I mean, I know that regular season wins and all that stuff, like, it doesn't, but like, where is this narrative coming from? It feels almost like it's this hangover from the start of the year when everyone was saying, oh, they're going to be lucky if they make the playoffs. They're not any good. And they kind of were actually very good. Their record was very good. So where is this coming from?
I mean, again, we could take a deep dive, and we don't have, enough time to do that. But I think when you look at the rosters of the teams and you look at, the talent level between both teams. Now, we have the far superior goalie, and I'm going out on a limb here to say right now, Jeremy Swayman is not only the best goalie still in the playoffs, I would argue that he's been the best player. Period. Period, end of story. But then when you go and you look at the other components of a team, right? Like let's face facts. We have struggled with 5-on-5 scoring. We have struggled and continue to struggle in the face-off dots. Where we've got players playing at, levels that on another team would not be playing at the same level, where you have, defensemen that maybe, we have them as a second pair defenseman. On another team, they'd be a third pair defenseman. Okay, fine. I'll give you that. But in the end, you know what? The only thing that matters, what the final score is.
Exactly.
That's the only friggin' thing that matters when all is said and done. And last night, the Bruins came out with more goals than the Florida Panthers. So last night, they were the better team than the Florida Panthers.
Yeah, I mean, for me, the very first thing that I noticed, and we'll talk a little bit about the game itself, but like just the biggest takeaway I had from that game was immediately I realized that Bob was beatable. Seeing him in how he was responding to these chances. To me, I felt he was not top notch, and I hoped that the Bruins would stick with it because it was only a matter of time, and that's absolutely what happened. And there's people love to talk about, oh, was there rust or was there good rest, and exhaustion versus energy. I think probably the Florida Panthers, to some degree, maybe for some of the guys, it was too long of a rest, right? Like, I don't know if we talked about it here, but in our Discord, we talked about the fact that, like, actually a long rest for the Bruins would be the worst thing that they could have. But also I think that they underestimated them to some degree because of the depth and, like, these other players who were stepping up, who, I think we want to stick tap. I mean, Pasta, probably his best game of the whole postseason, in spite of not scoring a goal and in spite of the Game 7 OT winner, like, his overall game. Who else was, there was quite a variety. Mason Lohrei. Who else was on your kind of stick tap list for folks from last night?
Oh, last night? The third line. The third line. You've got to give them credit. They were the Bruins' best line. And I would argue that they were the Bruins' best line in Game 7 against the Leafs, because still, our big guns, still aren't able to produce at a level that they need to produce if you're going to have long sustained success in the playoffs. But JVR, just that veteran presence, and he seems like rejuvenated in the last couple of games, right? Brazo had a bit of a coming out party last night. Oh, and I need to thank him personally because I put a little money on him, and my DraftKings account, was a little bit bigger and brighter as a result of his goal last night.
It's great to see that depth, because obviously you need to have depth the further you go along in the playoffs. And it's not to say that, those core players are doing nothing entirely, but you do also want to see them also convert on their chances and things. We saw some chances for, like, Charlie Coyle, and Marshy was very, involved in a lot of the plays. I think actually one of the roles I think that he's been performing that I think TV audiences probably don't actually see is he's kind of acting as this foil for the other teams. Like, other teams are going to be hyper focused on him to try and get him to get into trouble, right? Like, think about what was happening between him and Bert all of the last series. I feel like I've seen a few clips in the game where there are Florida players who are also trying to, like, go after him to get him in trouble, and it ultimately ties those players up, and that leaves all this other room for the Bruins to go out and do what they need to do to score on Bob.
And that's why in this series against the Panthers, it's even more important. Two things.
Yes.
To not minimize your engagement with them, because that's their MO. That little rat behavior after the whistle, or as soon as the official turns their proverbial back to give you a little shot, and what happens? What does the official normally see? The retaliation. So pick and choose your spots. When you get the opportunities and the refs do put them in the box for their rat behavior, that power play's got to come through. That power play has got to come through. It, was faltering in the late games against Toronto, and I think last night they might have only had one opportunity on the power play. It was
surprisingly a well-behaved game.
Right, for both teams, right? For both teams. But when those opportunities present themselves, you need to capitalize on them.
Yeah, there's no way that Florida is going to maintain this good behavior. I mean, I don't think that Boston would be the team to necessarily do a lot of that poking and, prodding, but I was surprised that Florida didn't do it as much in this last game, but I'm fully expecting more of that. And so hopefully that's the case. And thank God we have the PK that we do. It's
Unbelievable.
been, no,
The special team,
holy moly.
the Bruins penalty kill has been
Unreal.
off the charts, off the freaking charts good.
Yeah.
Doesn't necessarily mean you want to keep going to the box, because that's another thing that's in the penalty box. For Christ's sake, too many men on the ice penalty last night against.
We've had 3.
And you could see Monty just mouthing the words, which I don't want to say on our broadcast, but the acronym is, folks, FFS. Are you kidding me?
And it's like the most quintessential Bruin penalty, because whenever we get a too many men, all I think about is the famous Stanley Cup final that they lost because of too many men. So
yes.
Of course it's the Bruins, of course.
Ask John Cherry about that one.
That one makes no sense. Why does this keep happening? Why? That's kind of on the flip side. I mean, I guess you lay it at Monty's feet, but I mean, he also, what could he possibly really do, right? Like, he can't reach out and grab a guy and bring him in faster, or, it's.
No, too many men for me is always on the players. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
That's on the players.
Pay attention.
Right. You're not a bunch of mites waiting for the coach to open the friggin' door and say, okay, now it's your turn. All right. Exactly. They need to have more. And the fact that it's happened now more than once in the early stages of the playoffs, like, that shit just cannot happen. It's bad enough when you've got officials, making up phantom calls, or, a little tap of the stick gets you a slashing call. You don't need to add. You don't need to add to it. So that nonsense has got to be cleaned up. Yeah,
I agree. So along with that, what else have you got in the penalty box?
True. Who else did I put in the? Well, let's see. I still have another goal that bounces off a Bruins player that contributes to, for Jeremy Swayman's spectacular effort. Now, again, not intentional, but how many times have we seen that already in the playoffs?
At least 3.
At least 3. Okay. Pavel Zacha. I saw a little bit more jump in the game against Florida.
Mm-hmm.
But
did he
this
play
stat,
or was he center yesterday?
No, he was at center.
Mm-hmm.
He was at center. He is now, if I'm not mistaken, 19 postseason games without a goal.
Mm-hmm.
And I had him as being a significant factor in the Leafs series, under the assumption that, they were going to be all over Pasta like a cheap suit. And they were, except for that one moment when it mattered most with that overtime goal. And I want to just go back to that goal, because I know our listeners have likely watched it over and over and over again.
From every angle.
But that pass by Hampus Lindholm, chef's kiss.
Stunning.
Chef's kiss.
Yeah.
He knew exactly what he was doing.
Yep.
With that pass. And I'm wondering if that was part of, the strategy of practicing at the Garden before that game,
Very
because
much.
the bounces in that building
Very different.
have been bizarre.
Mm-hmm.
Bizarre.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
But he needs to get on the score sheet. That, I mean, it's got to happen, right? I mean, it has to happen.
Yeah, you hope so. And I know for me, the other person in the box, and I know you feel the same way because you called into Skate Pod to complain about Charlie McAvoy.
I don't know what's going on with this kid. I really don't.
Like,
I really don't.
I understand to some degree. It's gonna seem like an absurd amount of mistakes because there's a higher frequency because he plays a lot more minutes, right? That's one thing.
I know.
However, you know, and some of it you can chalk up to just like some bad luck, like if he blows a tire, okay, like whatever, that happens. But my concern is around some of the decision making that there was one in particular, I can't remember now if it was in game 7 or if it was in game 1, where he just had a chance and didn't take the shot. And I'm like, why on earth would you not take the shot? You know, and all throughout the season, we've talked about it in the Discord and here where he had a lot of games where it just seemed like he held on to it for just one extra beat too long, or he bobbled it just a little bit and it just kind of killed whatever momentum was happening. Is it the heavy weight of leadership, more people paying attention? Like, what?
I wish I had an explanation for it. This kid is supposed to be your franchise defenseman.
Mm-hmm.
And he has logged a ton of minutes for you. But there are sometimes when you say, in certain instances, now, you know, we're looking at the playoffs under a very, very different microscope.
Mm-hmm.
Are they quality minutes? That turnover last night that led to Matthew Tkachuk scoring a goal. You've got your back, and you're trying to make a weak-ass backhanded play out of your own. Like, that's something that I would expect to see Mason Lohrei do, not Charlie friggin' McAvoy. And we've seen him do that, right? Because we've talked about that scares us a little bit.
Yeah.
So we're watching Mason Lohrei elevate his game and seem to get better and better and better. And again, maybe Charlie is taking, you know, the role of, you know, teacher as a huge burden. I don't know. But all I know is that it's extremely noticeable. And people can disagree with me, and I'm sure that they will, but I just don't see franchise defensemen during these playoffs.
Yeah,
I'm not saying get rid of them. I'm not.
No.
Maybe am I expecting too much? I don't know.
It seems like it's just not the same as what we saw from him last year or the year before. And he was logging these heavy minutes last year, and I think he was probably putting in this kind of time the year before. But maybe it is just enough more, and who knows, right? But it's noticeable, and we want him out of that box ASAP because we need him. Like you said, you know, we've got Forbert back. Great. He had a decent game. But, you know, you want to be able to rely on him. You're going to be relying on him. So you just hope that it doesn't kind of go sideways, I guess, when it really matters the most. So we've talked about all the things we loved, all the things we've hated. What are you looking for in the next game? What do you want to see happen?
I want to see the same effort. I want to see the same effort.
Yeah.
I mean, there were still moments of the Bruins getting hemmed in their own end, which, it happens to all teams. It happens to all teams. The Bruins did a little bit of it to the Panthers last night. I just need to see consistent 60-minute effort. As we've talked about at this juncture, we wanted them, and it sounds like we're being, homers or, oh, this is just good enough. No, you're in the second round now. You're expected to now play complete games. I want to see continued decisiveness from Jim Montgomery. If you see instances similar to as you saw last night, where you see that your team has a lead and they're falling back into a similar pattern of sitting on their heels,
right,
and you call that timeout, you, in whatever way you want to let them know that you're not happy, and you get a shift the likes of which you got from Justin Brazeau and JVR and Freddie, and they ended up scoring that goal. That's what I want to see. Just put the best players out on the ice that give you the best chance to win.
Yeah.
And
I think
don't fool around with the goalie. I mean, I know there's been a lot of talk about
the
goalies, and Jeremy Swayman he's in a zone.
He's in a whole other
we
level.
are watching something really special right now with the way he's playing. And I don't know if how many people picked up on this. There was a scrum down at his end of the ice. Like literally every skater was like, it seemed like they were it was pig piled on top of him. And you could see him like laughing and smiling when he came up out of the pile. And I'm like, dude, you're twisted. Like you're really liking this stuff.
That's what I love about him, because goalies can be, when they're really locked in, they can sometimes be particularly serious or very like isolationist. And he kind of goes against that, he still seems like very engaged with the team, and he smiles all the time. And I think that's one of the things that makes him such a likable player. But just to kind of hammer home just how phenomenal he has been. So in his 7 games that he's played, he's allowed 10 goals. The expected allowed goals, so expected goals against, was 23. So he's clearly surpassing expectations there. He has a goals against average of 1.42, which the expected goals against average for him was 3.3. So exceeding that. And the wins above replacement, which basically is a statistic that says he's directly contributed to these wins, by far the most of literally every goaltender in the postseason by a lot, 2.20. So you could basically attribute 2 games that if he hadn't been in, basically the Bruins would have lost. The next highest is Igor Shesterkin with a wins above replacement of 0.97. That's the kind of difference that Jeremy Swayman is making right now. And he's facing shots. He's also made 210 saves, and saves on unblocked shot attempts, 463. I mean, that's the most of everyone. Jake Ottinger has 429 saves on unblocked shot attempts and saves on shots on goal. Again, Jeremy Swayman with his 210, Jake Ottinger at 173. So, you know, he's just unreal, the level that he is playing right now. This
And
is
who
like
saw this coming?
historical.
Who saw this coming? And
Right.
you know, we talked about it last week. You know, I was on a team rotation, but at this point in time, unless he gives you a reason
Yeah.
or pause to be concerned
Right.
about, you know, you see a drop in the level of play, or you know, God forbid there's an injury, I can't see how you take
Right.
him out. How you take him out
I mean, yeah,
of the lineup. You just can't at this point in time.
Right. Exactly. So, because this series is going to be very aggressive in terms of the frequency of play, probably because of how spread out the first round had to be. Maria and I are going to have another episode in a couple of days after game 2, just to stay on top of it, because they're going to have, like, if we were to wait a week, the series might be over. So we don't want to do that. We want to stay
and
on
it's
top
not
of
even,
it.
you know, it's not even that. We want to do appropriate justice to each game, you know, you know, and again, we're packing in a lot, folks, you know, because we didn't have an opportunity to talk about game 7 and, you know, talk about, you know, the beauty of that David Pastrnak goal, and moving on to this round, and then the quick turnaround for the Bruins. And, you know, we would be remiss too if we didn't give our congratulations and stick taps to the Brandon Carlo family. Indeed. Because, you know, they had their second child, a baby boy named Crew, and Brandon Carlo. This is why I love hockey players. This is why I love this time of the year. He, you know, helped his wife. They delivered a baby together. He hops on a plane and he gets to Sunrise, Florida, an hour before the game. Play with his teammates. Oh, and by the way, he scores a goal. In addition to that, and it was a laser from. It was a laser. So, you know, you can't make this shit up, that, you know. So congratulations to them.
Indeed. So we were hoping also, because of the time of day, that we would know who gets to draft Macklin Celebrini, but I think, as the NHL is wont to do, to put on a good show, they're going to drag it out, even though that started at 6:30 and it's already 7. So, oh well.
I think no, I'm checking my social media here, and it might be that the San Jose Sharks,
they actually got him?
They actually got the number 1 pick.
My condolences to Macklin and his family.
Do they even have a coach in San Jose yet?
They do not.
That's interesting.
Well, as we saw once many, many years ago, just because you get drafted there doesn't mean you have to sign.
True.
And Eric Lindros refusing to go to Quebec. So we'll see. But
so in closing, what do you expect to see? I expect, you know what we didn't put in the penalty box?
Why did we forget?
The lame fans in Florida.
Fair weather fans, forget it.
Like, there was virtually no noise in that building.
And then they all left. I would leave a hockey game early.
But even that, all right, you know, time is up. Your team's down 5-1, but throughout the course of the game, you've had a week off, folks. Your team needs to get some kind of mojo going, and you folks pretty much all sit on your hands and don't make any noise.
Wow.
Kind of crazy. So they're in the penalty box too.
Yeah, they worked for the Bruins. For me, I just want to see them continue the on-time starts, and just I have a feeling that Florida is going to come out even more aggressive, and
I agree with you.
And not just aggressive in terms of the physicality. I think they're going to be the pain in the ass team that
they showed a little bit of it. They showed a little bit of it last night, but that wasn't full exposure on the kind of crap that they can do.
I'm expecting a lot more of that. So, I didn't really have a lot of notes for the team like I have in the past. So, just kind of stick with it. Trust the process. Be in the moment. I didn't watch really any of the Tampa Bay series, so I don't know if last night's game for Bob was an anomaly or if that's really where he's at. Forget comparing him to Jeremy Swayman. I just think that he's a very beatable goalie if that's how he's playing, and his statistics from the previous series would imply to me that, yeah, he's a beatable goalie if he's not even saving 90% of the shots. So, and yeah, just I want to see that same thing, effort all the way down. And even if they lose, as long as we see that, I can't complain.
Right. If you go down with the fight, I'm going to give you a lot of credit. If you curl and turtle, yeah, that doesn't fly with me. And and I wanted them to have a chance, and to have a chance, they needed to win a game in Florida, and they did just that.
Yep.
So do we want to make any predictions on this series? Do we want to put ourselves on the hot seat?
I think we could very well see another 7 games.
Oh, Madonna mia, not with this team. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I think we're going to see another 7. And
well, if it goes 7 games, it'll be in Florida. So at least we won't have to worry about, the TD Garden mojo impacting the Bruins. So, I had said Bruins in 6 against the Leafs. I was wrong again, so people don't listen to me. But I'm going to, because I'm a glutton for punishment, I'm going to go Bruins in 6.
I believe I'm going to say Bruins in 7. Again.
And everyone else is going to laugh their asses off like, these two broads don't know what they're talking about. And yes, I did call us broads, but I can do it because I said it. Okay.
Exactly. Well, as always, our time went by fast, but we had 2 games to talk about and a lot to talk about. So, like I said, we'll be back in a couple days after game 2 to do a quick check-in, and hopefully we have more good things to talk about. But,
thanks for listening, folks. Please, consider joining our Discord group. You can follow me on X, Maria of H2O Town, and go Bruins.
Go Bees.